Today I'm taking a look at the Marvel Legends Blackheart Wave Dracula. Will I be down for the count, or does this vampire just plain suck? Stick around and find out. Welcome to 5 Points of Articulation. Starting with the packaging, and this is my first look at the Build-A-Figure style of the new Marvel Legends box. We've previously looked at things like the 85 Years collection, but this gives us our best idea of what to expect from the brand moving forward. Marvel Legends up in one corner, title down here, name of the character on the side, and up in the other corner we see this is the Blackheart Wave. That wraps around to the spine, where we get some pretty nice artwork. We get a smaller version of that picture as well as the name on the other spine, and then on the back we get that picture, a bio, the Build-A-Figure, in this case Blackheart, and all the figures that you'll need to build him. These new ones are more easily stackable. The shape of the box does showcase the spine artwork better, and no matter what you think of the new design, at least it isn't windowless. For packaging, I'm giving Dracula 5 points. Moving on to presentation, and Dracula stands at 6.5 inches, or 16.5 centimeters, and near as I can tell is a completely new sculpt. Aside from things like the old Tomb of Dracula comics, I'm not that familiar with Marvel's version of the character, but I have to say I do like this design. It's unique enough to stand out from other versions of the character, yet does kind of remind me of other versions. The red armor, for example, kind of evoking Gary Oldman's design. It feels like this draws a lot of inspiration from video games and anime, and in that regard would probably be at home in lots of different displays. Working our way top down, I'm very impressed by the head sculpt. I really like the bared fangs and all the wrinkles, and in general it's been painted well, especially the slight shadowing and the long billowy hair. That said, I do have a slight issue with the earrings, mainly that they've only been painted on the outside. It's an easy enough fix, but I shouldn't have to do it, though I will concede it's not as noticeable when the head's actually on the body. Moving on down, the cape is nice and tattered. The tatters give it a kinda sorta Batman feel, but there has been some really nice texture added. Again, I really like this armor. That also has some nice cracks and dings in it to give it an actual battle-worn feel, and the layering does a serviceable enough job of hiding the articulation. Even the buttons have some lifelike dings on them. His sleeves are sufficiently billowy, comparing them against figures like Red Skull and Kang, and they don't appear to be reuse. And then we get more armor detail for the gauntlets. The cape and the bodysuit is more of a dark gray than black. I should also point out that none of these reds actually match completely. Slight amount of mist paint on mine, and then all the way down we have some spiked knee pads and boots. I love the sculpt, but the mismatched reds are a bit distracting. For presentation, I'm giving Dracula 4 points. Moving on to Poseability, and while there are areas of frustration, there were also a couple of really nice surprises here. From the top, and Vlad's head is on a dumbbell joint. As such, he can't really look up as much as I'd like him to, though down's okay. He does get some nice tilt, which is important for when moving in to bite you on the neck, and in addition to side, he also has swivel in the ponytail. Just be warned, it does pop out pretty easily. Moving down, and not surprisingly, this cape does create some issues. If you futz with it, you can get the arms about this high, but of course when rotating you can really only go about as far as this high. Fortunately, the Count does have bicep swivel, but he does only have single jointed elbows. Even so, the bend is pretty good, but what astonished me is that Hasbro actually gave him forearm swivel. That in addition to the typical swivel hinge wrists. It should be noted, by the way, that the hinge on the left hand is up and down, but the sword hand goes left to right. Moving to the middle, and Dracula has a diaphragm joint. He can only arch back this far, which is basically nothing, and he can only hunch forward this far, which again is basically nothing. There is side to side, but admittedly it's just not that much. That said, there is at least no trouble with twist. Moving on down, and Drac has ball jointed hips. He can kick 90 degrees, and he also has a really impressive split. Moving down the leg, and there's thigh cut, but again, taken in context is fine. The knees at least are double jointed and have a very deep bend. They're also pinless, which is a plus. Moving all the way down, there isn't any cut for a boot, but there is an extra swivel in the ankle. Additionally, and like the lid of a coffin, Dracula's ankles can hinge and pivot. Between the limited range and the shoulders and diaphragm, I was actually going to knock this guy down to 3 points, but this Bram Stoker derivative gets a boost from the ankle and forearm swivel. For Poseability, I'm giving Vlad 4 points. Moving on to playability, and given all the new sculpting, I'm impressed by how much Hasbro packed in. Not surprisingly, Dracula has a sword. It has this really sinister, serrated edge. The hilt is pretty menacing as well. It actually reminds me a lot of the swords that came with the unmasked version of Red Hood. Believe it or not, though, Dracula's sword is actually bigger. He can hold that sword in his right hand, but he also comes with a good old-fashioned pair of fists. I'm also pleased to report that Dracula comes with an alternate static head. I don't normally like figures being this expressive, but in the case of monsters and things like that, I don't mind. Still, just having an alternate option does so much. This head also has a posable ponytail, but as you can see, it's a completely different one. The open mouth head's is more billowy, whereas this one's a bit more Ariana Grande. The nice thing is that if you wanted to, you can switch the ponytails between the two different heads. This allows for even more display options. Of course, this is a build-a-figure wave, and Dracula includes the left arm of Blackheart. As a new sculpt, he's nice and pinless, and also sufficiently prickly. He comes pre-loaded with an open hand, but also includes this more gestury one. But playability is more than just build-a-figure pieces and ponytails. It's also about how well your fanged figure plays with others. For the first and most obvious comparison, and here he is with Blade the Vampire Hunter. I know there have been other Blade figures, but this is the only Marvel Legends one I have. Otherwise, and for a couple of other comic book creatures of the night, and here's Dracula with Morbius the Living Vampire, and Morlun from Spider-Man, who, let's be honest, kinda looks like a traditional Dracula. For those hoping for a head swap, unfortunately, Morlun doesn't have much of a neck, and Dracula has a bit too much. Based on their similarly supernatural natures, and here's Dracula with Ghost Rider. Though these characters did face off in 1991's Ghost Rider Rides Again, it wasn't this Dracula design, nor was it this version of Ghost Rider. But for some characters Dracula's most definitely had some dealings with, and here we have Doctor Strange, the Sorcerer Supreme, fellow Eastern European despot Dr. Doom representing the Cabal, and Cyclops from when they clashed in X-Men Curse of the Mutants. If I'm not mistaken, this is the story that introduced this Dracula design. That story also featured Wolverine, Emma Frost, the White Queen, and this modern version of Rogue. All we need is the vampire version of Jubilee. For another mutant the Countess clashed with, and here's Apocalypse. I chose the Build-A-Figure version, but for the very first Marvel character that Marvel's Dracula crossed over with, and here we have Spider-Man. This one's the retro card version. For a relative scale comparison, and here's Dracula with Pizza Spidey and the Spectacular Spider-Man, and as always, here he is with Stealth Iron Man. Between the alternate head, hands, weapon, and build-a-pieces, I'm pretty happy with the piece count, but the added swappability of the ponytail really adds some options. And that's to say nothing about getting him to slip into other 6-inch toy lines. For playability, I'm giving Dracula 5 points. This leaves us with nothing left to discuss but the price. Dracula and the other figures in the wave are $24.99 and are a fan channel exclusive. Or should I say Fang channel? That just means you're not going to find them at stores like Walmart and Target, and you're going to have to go either online or places like GameStop and Books A Million. Despite some minor quibbles, I'm overall very happy with this figure. I like him so much that for price I'm giving Dracula 5 points, averaging out to a fantastic total of 4.6 out of 5. For more vampire videos, check out one of these. Until next time, play nice, have fun, and be spooky.